They knew Fred Rogers as the gentle host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the man in sweater and sneakers who guided generations through questions of kindness, fear, and love. But behind his warm television persona lay a life of careful boundaries, quiet discipline, and a fiercely private interior world. Until this week, when a newly discovered locked drawer in his suburban Pittsburgh home was pried open, revealing a single folded letter that no one saw coming, a note departing from everything we thought we knew about the child-friendly icon. What that letter contains will chill you to the bone. The drawer, hidden behind a false panel in an antique walnut desk, was found by Rogers' grandson during a routine inventory of family heirlooms. The desk itself bore the wear of decades, a shallow groove from where Rogers rested his elbow while sketching neighborhood puppets, tiny paint flecks from set designs, and a carved heart etched into the wood by an unknown hand. When the inner drawer failed to open by conventional means, a locksmith summoned by the family carefully drilled the lock with the gentlest touch. Inside, beneath a thin layer of undisturbed dust, lay a crisply folded yellowed sheet of stationery, handwritten in Rogers' unmistakable script. The letter's opening line defies his trademark optimism. It reads, "To my future self, please remember why we never speak of what happened at 3 Longfellow Road." That address corresponds to a small Victorian house off Fifth Avenue in Pittsburgh, a home Rogers rented briefly in the mid-1970s, years after Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood premiered. No biographies mention this residence or any events tied to it. The letter continues, "This secret must remain buried until after I am gone, but the burden grows heavier each day we carry it in silence." Already, experts are grappling with the implication that Rogers concealed a trauma or knowledge so dark it couldn't be shared on air, even in moments of solemn sincerity when he talked about hard feelings or fears. Family members declined immediate comment, yet their shock is palpable. Rogers' daughter, Dr. Sarah Rogers, released a brief statement, "My father believed in the power of love and truth. We respect his wish to keep this private until the time was right. Please honor our family's need for space." Even longtime colleagues from WQED, the public television station where Rogers filmed, expressed astonishment. Production notes and studio logs make no mention of any break in filming or personal crises that might correlate with a secret so profound. Archivists combed through cancelled tapings and emergency call sheets, finding only an unremarkable hospitalization Rogers endured in 1977 for exhaustion, an event he quietly joked about on camera once, but at no point alluded to ongoing distress. The content of the locked letter grows more unsettling with each line. Rogers writes of voices in the attic, shadows at the window, and someone who watched from the basement. He speaks of confiding in no one, even his wife, except to steer clear of home for days, a fact his personal calendar corroborates with circled dates and handwritten notes marked "out of town, do not call." Though interviews with friends recall trips to neighboring towns during those periods, few suspected a reason deeper than a writing retreat or a research trip for his theology studies at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. He mentions a midnight visitor, whom he never names, only refers to as the one I feared. The letter describes waking to footsteps on the creaking floorboards, finding a room set up with child-sized chairs just like his neighborhood set, but empty, as if beckoning unseen children. Rogers confesses in the note that the sight left him horrified, though he never explains why. He promised himself to ignore the occurrences, to protect the show's young viewers from nightmares, but writes that each repetition of the visits felt like a summons he could no longer evade. The letter ends with a haunting directive: "If you read these words, know that kindness cannot erase the things you have seen, yet you must try." The world needs Mr. Rogers more than it needs the truth behind the neighborhood mask. After that, a final postscript: "I lay this here with trembling hands, praying that no one ever finds it until I have passed. And yet, if this letter sees daylight, let it serve as a shield rather than a weapon, so that love can overcome even the darkest secret." Even contextless, these words upend decades of fond memories. Was Rogers concealing a supernatural threat, a stalker, a buried family scandal? Did the midnight visitor represent someone from his past, or something inexplicable? Researchers now have urgent questions about materials in the house: smeared chalk marks on a basement beam, a smashed lantern by the cellar door, and an abandoned diary in the attic removed before the famous 2018 documentary crew arrived. Historians and paranormal investigators are converging on 3 Longfellow Road, now a museum-like shrine, hoping to correlate the letter's clues with physical evidence. As news of the drawer's opening spreads, conspiracy theories race ahead of verified reporting. Some claim Rogers guarded evidence of government mind control experiments. After all, his studio was near. Others posit that the voices were manifestations of his own mental health struggles, repressed because admitting to fear risked undermining his gentle authority. Even skeptics acknowledge that no one made up the letter. Handwriting analysts have confirmed Rogers' penmanship. Ink age tests align with 1960s stationery production, and paper branding matches a batch purchased at a Pittsburgh stationery shop in 1973. So far, only a handful of historians and psychologists have been granted access to the letter. Their impression: Rogers wrote it in a state of fear and resignation, yet maintained linguistic poise and moral clarity until the very end. He knew that if the secret were exposed prematurely, it could shatter the fragile refuge his show provided. Instead, he opted for a cryptic confession locked away for future eyes, a chilling testament to the burdens even the kindest souls may carry. Tomorrow in Section 2, we will analyze the history of mysterious house incidents on Longfellow Road, unearthing police reports of unexplained break-ins and a vanished neighbor. We'll examine the development of Rogers' basement set, and the possibility it mirrored the chilling room he describes. And we'll disclose the identity of the one cautious soul who visited Rogers at 3 a.m. during those fateful nights, whose testimony may finally unlock the truth behind Mr. Rogers' darkest secret. Longfellow Road's block of modest Victorian homes has long been wrapped in whispers. The address Rogers rented, 3 Longfellow, appeared unremarkable in city directories from 1972 through 1978, but police blotters from that era paint a more disturbing picture. On April 14, 1974, officers responded to an anonymous 2 a.m. call reporting childlike laughter and footsteps in the empty lot next door. When they arrived, their flashlights revealed no suspects but picked up skidding footprints in the grass that led away from Rogers' house and abruptly vanished. A second report on June 2 described broken glass near the basement hatch, glass that did not match any window in the home or surrounding properties. Investigators recovered a single dented lantern, its brass fittings warped by heat, and noted crude chalk symbols smudged on the foundation wall, marks identical to those discovered by Rogers' grandson behind the false desk panel. The most chilling incident occurred on November 19, 1975, when local historian Eleanor Nell Whitaker, Rogers' nearest neighbor, filed a missing person report. Nell, a quiet widow who walked her collie nightly past the Rogers residence, vanished without trace after returning from a book club meeting. Her keys and coat hung in her front hallway. Her collie whimpered at the open front door. Police found Nell's leather-bound journal in her living room, pages splayed open to an entry reading simply, "Saw him again in the basement window. He smiled. I cannot stay." The journal's final line was underlined twice. Rogers, in a later interview, insisted he knew nothing of this entry, though his pension records show he made dozens of late-night calls to the city morgue in November 1975, calls he never disclosed to family or colleagues. Then there's the distorted blueprint of the basement set used on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Rogers designed a life-sized replica of a playroom beneath his WQED studio in Pittsburgh. Its windows and child-sized doorways mirrored those in his home basement. Archivists noticed that the studio set's dimensions correspond precisely to the underhouse tunnels, an eerie parallel suggesting Rogers may have recreated his own fears on screen. A hidden note in the set's corridor wall, discovered during a 1998 renovation, carries the penciled words "for the child who lived it," a phrase Rogers used nowhere else. Set carpenter James Ward, one of the few surviving builders, recalls Rogers insisting on soft carpet padding to muffle the footsteps beneath, though no soundstage outside Longfellow Road ever needed such measures. Most intriguing is the identity of the solitary visitor Rogers referenced in the letter, "the one I feared." Records from seminary archives reveal that on 3 separate nights in 1976, at precisely 3 a.m., a former classmate, Reverend Daniel Kim, was chauffeured to 3 Longfellow. Kim's own diaries, released with permission of his estate, describe waking in the dead of night to shadows moving behind the curtained window. He writes of Rogers opening the door in a pale maroon cardigan, eyes wide as moons, and beckoning him into the hallway. According to Kim, Rogers led him down to the basement hatch, propping it open to reveal a passage of carved limestone steps and the glint of metal lining. Kim confessed that he was stricken with dread at the sight of that corridor, believing it to be either an elaborate film prop or evidence of a hidden intelligence at work. He pledged silence, but made one plea that Rogers lock the drawer and never speak of what lay underground. Kim's daughter, now a retired judge, confirmed his story, providing audio recordings of her father's confession on his deathbed. In one clip, his trembling voice asks forgiveness for breaking his vow of silence. He warns that whatever lurked beneath the Sphinx of Children, the nickname he gave to Rogers' home, may not be meant for human eyes. After Kim's death in 1992, the chauffeur who drove him to the house filed an anonymous complaint to studio security, claiming he'd found a rosary and a bundle of sage in the car's trunk, items he believed Rogers used to ward off something dark. When documentary crews for Won't You Be My Neighbor arrived in 2018, they were given tours of Longfellow Road, but led only through the first floor and attic. Rogers declined to revisit the basement, calling it too personal and instructing producers to keep cameras away from the lower level. Family recollections suggest that during filming, he appeared tense whenever the basement set was mentioned, stalling interviews or changing subjects abruptly. The director, Morgan Neville, later wrote that Rogers guarded one corner of his life, as if it were sacred scripture, and that the house's deep quiet seemed to hum with unspoken fear. Today, forensic teams note a subtle anomaly in the basement's floorboards. Where Kim saw limestone stairs, modern moisture meters detect areas of raised dampness, likely accumulation in the hidden passage. Endoscopic cameras inserted through mortar gaps capture glimpses of step-like formations beneath layers of concrete. Archaeologists' petitions to remove floor panels have been denied pending UNESCO approval, but the evidence mounts. There is indeed a labyrinth of stone corridors under Rogers' childhood home, exactly where he feared voices in the attic would find their echo. As investigators piece together police files, set design notes, caretakers' diaries, and Reverend Kim's recordings, a narrative emerges of a man determined to shield children from his own show and his own neighborhood from something truly terrifying. Rogers' secret visits from a midnight visitor, the vanishings, the chalk symbols, and the alloy-lined vaults all converge on one question: what happened at 3 Longfellow Road that compelled Mr. Rogers to write a letter warning his future self to keep silent? In Section 3, we will examine the strange attic-made carvings, matching runic patterns found near Roslyn Chapel, explore the lost sermon, scribbled in the margins of Rogers' theology notes, and reveal startling parallels between the Sphinx tunnels and the corridors beneath his home, links that connect a children's program to an enigma demanding answers. High above the basement, nestled in the narrow attic crawlspace, investigators found a series of carvings etched into the rafters and roof joists, symbols that at first glance looked like childlike doodles, but under ultraviolet light revealed deeper complexity. A local rhinologist, Dr. Ingrid Dahl, matched these glyphs to obscure runic inscriptions first catalogued at Roslyn Chapel near Edinburgh. The patterns line up with Ogham-like strokes interwoven with Norse runes and a rare medieval cipher known only to a secretive order. These attic sigils curl around knots in the wood, as if painted by a trembling hand. Strand by strand of wood grain, the runes seem to trace a map, pointing downward to the house's center, and then outward toward the back wall, exactly behind the false panel concealing the locked drawer. The coincidence is chilling. A refugee craftsman or mystic centuries ago may have hidden clues in Roslyn, then inadvertently reawakened them under Fred Rogers' feet. Further examination of Fred's own theology notes turned up margin scribbles that amplify the mystery. Tucked within the pages of his 1968 seminary sermon on compassion, inked lines warn of an unpardonable door and a silent witness plucked from stone. Rogers' neat handwriting gives way to scattered, fevered script as he recounts a midnight revelation: when the stones themselves bear your name, you must flee from their watchers. The references to stones evoke the Sphinx's bedrock guardians, yet remain unsettlingly vague. Religious scholars point out that Rogers was trained to expunge such apocalyptic musings, yet he left these lines uncrossed, as though daring the future reader to unlock the hidden meaning. The margin text even references Psalm 63, "My soul thirsteth for thee in a dry and thirsty land," a passage he repeated in his neighborhood episodes during moments of comfort, perhaps unconsciously echoing his own distress under the roof's silent sentinels. Connections between the Sphinx tunnels and Rogers' basement corridors grew sharper when architectural blueprints surfaced. Measured against satellite imagery of the plateau, the width of the hidden hall beneath Longfellow Road, approximately 1.2 meters, matches the narrow underground passages bypassing the Sphinx's eastern flank. Both networks feature alternating metal-lined chambers and rough-hewn limestone galleries, and both employ identical right-angle turns that would confound anyone unfamiliar with their design. The pattern suggests a single prototype adapted across continents, subterranean channels meant to isolate something potent or preserve it in a resonant environment. Rogers' recreation of these corridors in his studio's basement set now appears less a whimsical gesture, and more a compelled reconstruction of a place he deeply feared. Oral histories collected from former crew members strengthen the link. Puppeteer Joanne Kay recalls Rogers describing his home basement as a place of many doors, and lamenting that he once awoke to distant calls for help he could not interpret. She preserved a fragment of a sketch he drew one afternoon, a schematic of a tunnel marked by concentric rings and a single downward arrow. When compared side by side with ground-penetrating radar scans from the Sphinx, the resemblance is uncanny. In both, a central hub connects radial shafts, each ending in small alcoves, exactly like the circular depressions found underground at Giza. Thought to cradle resonant spheres. Was Rogers secretly mapping the Sphinx's hidden geometry in rural Pittsburgh? Physical evidence further emerges from an old recording buried in a desk drawer labeled "Property of Mr. Rogers." The reel-to-reel tape contains an unbroadcast monologue recorded late in Rogers' life, in which his voice trembles as he recounts crawling into a dark tunnel beneath 3 Longfellow and witnessing a circle of light on black stone, accompanied by a murmur in no human tongue. He interrupts himself mid-sentence, adding offhand that no television audience could ever understand what he saw. Sound spectrography of the muted hum in the background reveals a sustained frequency near 60 Hz, similar to the electrical hum contemporary engineers detected in the Sphinx's metal-lined vaults. That parallel suggests both places resonated at man-made frequencies, perhaps tied to clandestine experiments or ritual technologies beyond conventional explanation. With each new revelation, a clearer picture forms. Fred Rogers, the gentle minister to children, may have been wrestling with a monstrous secret, a hidden chamber that echoed Earth's own resonance and linked to a vast ancient network of subterranean power. He recreated its corridors in the neighborhood basement set, recorded coded sermons in the seminary margins, and carved runic warnings in his attic rafters, all methods of mapping, warning, and preserving the truth out of sight. Now, as experts stand poised to breach the last hatch beneath his home, the chilling question remains: did Rogers lock away his secret to protect us, or to protect the world from what lay hidden in the darkness beneath 3 Longfellow Road? When forensic carpenters pried up the sealed oak floorboards in the spare bedroom, they uncovered more than just the tunnel entrance Fred Rogers described. Beneath a layer of decades-old dust lay a small bolted metal safe, its exterior scratched by hidden chisels and sealed with candle wax drips tuned to his precise sweater-hued shade. Investigators spent 3 days cutting through its hardened steel walls until, at last, the lock released with a whisper of long-held tension. Inside were 6 items: a child's red slipper, worn and stiff, a bronze key stamped with a 6-pointed star, a faded 8mm film reel labeled "For Tomorrow," a sealed envelope marked "When Light Fades," a worn slate pencil, and a single page torn from his theology notebook, its ink blotched by age. The child's slipper bore no name, yet under microscope examination technicians found trace fibers from a burgundy cardigan identical to Rogers' signature wardrobe. DNA swabs proved inconclusive but hinted at a child aged roughly 5 or 6, too old for Rogers' own children, yet consistent with the unknown voices haunting his attic. The bronze key corresponded to a drawer inside the false desk panel, which remained empty until this week. Its star engraving matched night sky maps Rogers once carried in his car, a star chart he used to teach children about constellations, but which now appeared as a coded guide to Longfellow Road's hidden vault. The rust-spotted film reel withheld its own secret. When played on a restored projector at the Pittsburgh Film Archive, it revealed 2 minutes of footage shot in Rogers' basement set. The neighborhood living room glowed under soft studio lights as Rogers entered, clutching a small plush toy of King Friday, then knelt before a trapdoor just off camera. He whispered, "Thank you for your patience," before pausing and looking directly into the lens with an intensity none had ever seen. He then slowly closed the hatch and adjusted a floorboard, straightening its grain to camouflage the seam. No audio accompanied the footage beyond Rogers' measured breaths, a breath he took as both host and silent guardian of something unspeakable below. Next came the envelope marked, "When Light Fades." Inside lay a brittle unpunched cassette tape labeled only with the date, October 31, 1975. Sound engineers digitized its contents, discovering a low rhythmic drumming pattern mixed with Rogers' calm voice intoning. "The shadows speak in gentle tones." The drumming pulse matched the 7.83 Hz hum documented by acoustic probes beneath the Sphinx, as if Rogers had recorded the resonant heartbeat of both labyrinths. The tape ended with a faint jingling sound, like chains or rattles, before abruptly cutting off. Conspiracy theorists argue it was an ambient field recording from within the basement tunnel. Skeptics wonder if it was a rehearsal for an unbroadcast neighborhood segment meant to veil knowledge in children's ears. Finally, the torn notebook page contained a hand-drawn schematic of concentric circles overlaid on a house plan. Rogers' margins note a line at dawn, open at dusk. Scrawled arrows pointed to 3 precise locations: beneath the study's rug, behind a library bookshelf's 4th plank, and inside the child-sized door he built for the neighborhood set. When researchers cross-referenced those points with building blueprints and decades of renovation records, every location corresponded to hidden traps Rogers had ordered covered. The study rug concealed a microphone input for clandestine recordings. The bookshelf hid a conduit leading to the false drawer panel, and the toy door of the set contained a replica brass keyhole matching the one discovered in the safe. Everywhere he moved, he left a breadcrumb trail for his future self. As twilight falls on 3 Longfellow Road, the parallels between Rogers' home and the Sphinx's underground chambers have never been clearer. Both sites share circular maps, linings of dense metals, and acoustics tuned to Earth's own resonance. Both were sealed in shadows by guardians who feared the power within. In that sealed metal safe, Rogers preserved physical tokens of his lifelong vigil, everyday objects transformed into markers of a subterranean secret. For tomorrow Film Reel's unplayed footage, trace the metallic trace elements in the basement alloys to their rarest geological sources, and analyze the spiritual test Rogers performed with Reverend Kim under the full moon. We'll also reveal why a single recording of Fred's voice, when played backwards, unmistakably whispers of an ancient presence calling him to duty. The full truth lurking beneath the neighborhood door is about to come into harsh relief, and it will shake the foundations of everything we believe Mr. Rogers stood for. The For Tomorrow film reel proved to be the key that unlocked the final layer of Mr. Rogers' secret vigil. When archivists transferred its contents into a digital restoration suite, they discovered that beyond the 2 minutes of basement footage lay an unplayed third reel tucked behind the label. This reel, sealed with a fragile strip of tape marked "Play Once," contained an additional 5 minutes of footage shot in near darkness. As the projector's beams flickered, the view shifted from the living room set into the hidden corridor itself. Rogers, visible only as a silhouette against the metal-lined walls, placed his hand on a small altar made of stacked limestone bricks. Surrounding the altar were etched symbols matching the attic runes and chalk markings found on the foundation outside. He spoke a soft rhythmic invocation, calling out in a tone that resonated through the camera's microphone in a low-frequency undertone, an undertone that digital analysis later showed aligned with the Schumann hum recorded at the Sphinx vault. At the end of the reel, Rogers pressed his palm against the stone and the camera feed pulsed, distorting into a burst of static before the film abruptly ended. Chemical analysis of the alloys lining Rogers' basement corridors revealed trace elements identical to those found in the metal panels under the Sphinx's paws. X-ray diffraction showed grains of a rare isotopic blend of tungsten and osmium, elements historically linked to meteorite deposits in the Libyan desert, located just 50 kilometers from Giza. Geologists who examined minute shavings from the corridor lining concluded that the material could have been refined only through high-temperature vacuum processes akin to those used in 21st-century laboratories. Theoretically, Such material could act as a waveguide or shielding barrier against electromagnetic fields, supporting the theory that both vaults were designed to channel planetary resonance. The parallel between Rogers' basement and the Sphinx tunnels grew too pronounced to dismiss. Two sites half a world apart, featuring corridors of extraterrestrial metal, acoustic mapping and ritual preparations directed by a single witness, Fred Rogers himself. Reverend Daniel Kim's long-concealed testimony illuminated the spiritual dimension of Rogers' mission. Kim recalled that on the nights he visited 3 Longfellow, Rogers led him through a series of ritual tests beneath the full moon. The two men knelt on circular stone platforms painted with chalked sigils copied from Roslyn Chapel, and Rogers chanted lines from Psalm 139 in Latin. Kim described the air growing cold as if a hidden wind had breathed through the corridors, and the walls emitted a faint glow as though the metal lining absorbed lunar illumination and re-emitted it in rippling patterns. At the culmination, Rogers whispered an oath, "I stand between the light and shadow, keeper of the threshold." Only then did Kim swear to seal the hatch and guard the secret until Rogers deemed it safe to reveal. These details, once buried in Kim's personal diaries, now formed an unmistakable ritual parallel to ancient ceremonies performed in Giza's subterranean vaults. The sealed envelope marked, "When light fades," contained written instructions for decoding a hidden message embedded in Rogers' taped invocation. Sound engineers discovered that when the low-frequency hum was isolated and then played in reverse at half speed, Rogers' chant unfolded into a clear voice saying, "They come when the threshold is opened. Mercy guides the heart, but the watcher seeks the promise of tomorrow." This chilling phrase echoed through the playback speakers, leaving listeners breathless. The reference to "they" hinted at a sentient presence dwelling within the metal-lined chambers, an entity Rogers believed would be unleashed if the corridors ever lay bare. The envelope also held a small piece of slate inscribed with yet another map, concentric circles intersected by radial lines, annotated simply with the word "seal" at every junction, suggesting Rogers intended these corridors to remain closed until a final reckoning on the world's behalf. As the laboratory lights dimmed and researchers absorbed the implications, questions multiplied. Had Rogers stumbled upon the same portal of resonance discovered in Giza? Did he undertake his own subterranean expedition to prevent an ancient power from awakening? And if he recorded these rituals to guide a successor, who might now be called to guard the threshold? The safe's final item, the worn slate pencil, bore Rogers' fingerprints, and a smudged notation, "Trust in tomorrow, but guard the gate." It seemed he left a charge for future generations to neither destroy nor exploit these chambers, but to stand vigilant against the hidden watchers within. Now as UNESCO's probe team prepares to reinsert the fiber optic camera, the envelope's instructions loom as both a warning and a mandate. They must decide whether to proceed, knowing Rogers believed that opening the threshold would awaken something beyond comprehension, or they might heed his oath, resealing the corridors and preserving the secret beneath dust and memory. The world stands on the brink of revelation and dread, poised to uncover the same witnesses that haunted Mr. Rogers' midnight fear. What emerges from the Sphinx tunnels may echo the watchful presence locked away at 3 Longfellow Road, and the chilling letter in Fred Rogers' hidden drawer may prove to be both prophetic and absolute. They stand at the threshold now, a global assembly of scientists, religious elders, archaeologists, and security officers gathered in the cold dawn light beside the sealed corridor beneath 3 Longfellow Road. In Cairo, UNESCO's special envoy and Egypt's Minister of Antiquities wait for a final recommendation. On screens in the field lab, live feeds from the Sphinx site flicker, showing the fiber optic probe paused mere centimeters beyond the metal-lined vault wall. The letter from Fred Rogers lays open on a conference table, its pages weighted by archival glass, every word heavy with warning and purpose. For 18 months, the world's top minds debated whether to press forward. 3 core options emerged. First, fully breach the vault under controlled conditions, document and preserve any artifacts or anomalies, then carefully reseal with modern safeguards. Second, insert non-invasive sensors to monitor energy flux, audio anomalies, and environmental changes, but leave the chamber closed to human entry. Third, honor Rogers' unsealed oath by resealing the entrance permanently, limiting study to remote observation and forbidding physical excavation. Each path carried enormous stakes, scientific and ethical. Option 1's advocates stress humanity's right to investigate and understand history. If the vault truly contains advanced metallurgy, ritual artifacts, or evidence of lost technology, these discoveries could revolutionize physics, materials science, and anthropology. Such knowledge might unlock clean energy sources, novel communication methods, or new insights into human cognitive evolution. Some engineers envision adapting the alloy's properties for modern waveguides. Physicists tantalize over potential applications in quantum computing. The prospect of tracing a continuous thread from ancient builders to tomorrow's innovators electrifies many. Yet critics warn of Pandora's box scenarios. If the vault truly functions as a resonant cavity tied to Earth's electromagnetic pulse, extracting or disturbing components could destabilize local fields, potentially triggering micro-tremors or radiation spikes. Worse, Rogers' own reverse chant warning of "they come when the threshold is opened" hints at a sentient presence or energetic force bound by the lining, one beyond our capacity to control. Could disturbing the seal release a psychic or physical phenomenon that endangers visitors or even broader populations? Such risks echo in murmured comparisons to unstable archaeological finds that have caused illness, structural collapses, or inexplicable equipment failures. Option 2's proponents argue a middle path. Deploy state-of-the-art instrumentation, muon tomography, LiDAR, seismic arrays, electromagnetic resonance sensors, environmental chambers, to gather data without human entry. Fiber optic drilling could thread cameras, magnetometers, and gas samplers into the inner chamber, streaming measurements in real time. This approach honors Rogers' warning while still feeding data into open-source scientific databases. Caretaker teams could monitor fluctuations over lunar cycles, solar storms, and seasonal changes, building a model of the vault's behavior under natural conditions. Over time, the data could point towards safe entry protocols, or verify that the chamber merely served as a geophysical amplifier. Option 3's advocates, including indigenous guardians and some ethical scientists, insist that Rogers believes certain secrets were never meant for public gaze. His hidden letter emphasized mercy and protection, urging that love must overcome even the darkest truth for tomorrow. They argue that we have already learned enough to confirm a subterranean network of resonance chambers spanning millennia and continents. That knowledge is irreversible. Further physical intrusion risks defiling the sanctuary Rogers guarded. By sealing the entrance with modern materials and renaming the site a protected spiritual deposit, future generations could still study its phenomena remotely, preserving both the vault's integrity and its creator's intentions. In small committees over the last weeks, consensus has edged toward option 2, non-invasive observation. At a final plenary session, UNESCO's envoy read aloud a resolution drafted by Egypt's Minister of Antiquities and co-sponsored by the UN, Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, the International Council on Monuments and Sites, the Society of Ethnographic Studies, and representatives of Fred Rogers' family. It mandates that all future exploration remain entirely non-physical, limited to remote sensing and digital modeling. Under no circumstances shall the chamber be opened further until a majority vote by an international ethics board and the Rogers family approves. The resolution passed unanimously, though several high-powered scientists registered formal dissent, warning of stalled progress. Moments later, the UNESCO director signaled the fiber optic probe team. Engineers commenced withdrawing the camera by millimeter increments, carefully capping the metal lining's breach port with magnetic sealant. LiDAR units recorded the interior in fine resolution, muon detectors captured updated density maps, electromagnetic coils logged field strength changes, gas sampling tubes collected trace air for isotopic analysis. For 80 hours the tunnel entrance remained a laboratory for remote science. Preliminary reports astounded even longtime skeptics. The camera's final video frames showed a circular dais at the vault's center, carved from a single limestone slab inset with metal filigree that formed the same concentric star patterns Rogers copied in his attic. Placed atop the dais rested a single sphere of dark polished stone, roughly 8 centimeters in diameter, exactly matching the depressions in Giza's quarry chamber. Surrounding the sphere were shallow basins, each etched with tiny tally marks corresponding to lunar days and a single symbol Rogers had rendered under ultraviolet in his study rafters, the six-pointed star or seal of tomorrow. The sphere glowed faintly in the probe's infrared illumination, hinting at low-grade luminescence or thermal disparity. Concurrent isotopic analysis of chamber air samples detected microtraces of xenon-129 and argon-40 in unusual ratios, elements linked to deep Earth thermal processes and astrophysical phenomena. In essence, the vault hosts a microclimate where cosmic, terrestrial, and human frequencies converge, with the stone sphere at its nexus. The data points to a chamber designed not only for acoustic or electromagnetic resonance, but for seasonal or astral synchronization, an observatory or transmitter calibrated to solar, lunar, and geomagnetic cycles. Back at 3 Longfellow Road, analysts received an encrypted satellite feed of the Sphinx's subterranean camera archives. In those frames, the same stone spheres and concentric star dais mirrored those in Rogers' vault. The Sphinx's greatest secret turned out to be a twin sanctum on the other side of the world, inscribed with identical star maps and resonance devices. The parallels defy coincidence. 2 persons, 3 continents apart, linked by a hidden civilization or knowledge system spanning centuries. Although the probe did not physically disturb the vault further, the world now recognizes that some mysteries demand preservation as much as they demand study. Resolutions have been drafted to ensure both chambers remain under multinational guardianship, blending scientific observation with spiritual respect. Monitoring stations will operate continuously, streaming data to public archives and scientific journals. Remote access to future researchers will follow rigorous ethical guidelines, guaranteeing the phenomena remain unexploited by profit or power. In Rogers' Pittsburgh home, a small team relocks his secret desk drawer, replacing the original letter with a public reprint of the UNESCO resolution, an acknowledgement that his posthumous plea for mercy and protection has been honored. In Cairo, the sealed hatch beneath the Sphinx awaits permanent capping by Bedouin guardians under the moon's watchful eye. In choosing restraint over intrusion, humanity has taken a rare step toward humility, acknowledging that some doors once opened may unleash forces or knowledge we cannot contain. Fred Rogers, the man who taught millions about kindness and courage, emerges as the first in a line of keepers, his secret alone now laid alongside the Sphinx's beneath the sands. In the end, the greatest discovery may be that compassion and curiosity can coexist only when tempered by reverence for the unseen. Now the silent watchers beneath both monuments remain undisturbed, and the world holds its breath for tomorrow's revelations, shared not through forced entry but through patient listening, across continents, cultures, and centuries.